Welcome to the last section of Module 2. You made it. This section is called Module 2.5, Test and Repeat. If you're going through the training independently, make sure to open up the training guide link for Module 2.5. Remember, only a happy parrot talks regularly. The O was for observe, the A is for ask, the H is for hypothesize, the P is for predict, the T is for test, and the R is for repeat. After you have a hypothesis and a prediction, the next step is to test them. To do this, you need to create an experiment or a study. This means collecting information, comparing two or more groups, and making sure those groups are as similar as possible. For example, you could follow two groups of pregnant people for several months. One group receives regular support groups to help manage stress and anxiety, while the other group does not receive this support. After giving birth, you compare their levels of postpartum depression or anxiety using surveys or interviews. You might predict that the group who received counseling will have 20% lower levels of postpartum depression compared to the group that did not receive counseling. Now let's talk about repeats. It's very important to repeat an experiment for a few reasons. First, repeating an experiment helps make sure the results are not just by chance or mistake. You want to rule out any oops. Second, if the hypothesis is correct, the results should be the same each time you test it. This shows the findings are not just a one-time thing. And third, repeating the experiment gives researchers a chance to improve their hypothesis or prediction based on what they find. If the first test doesn't show the expected results, repeating it can help discover new information or explain why the results were different. Let's say the first test shows that counseling did not reduce postpartum depression. Because of this, researchers might try new approaches based off of these observations. For example, they might observe that some participants said the support groups were not tailored to their needs, that it was hard to engage with, that people didn't like the group format, or other life stressors like financial issues or lack of support played a larger role in the mental health outcomes, so a support group wasn't enough to make a change. In these instances, you might repeat the same experiment, but do something a little differently to see if it changes the results. You also might repeat an experiment in a new group of people who have different characteristics. For example, if you originally only tested the support group among English-speaking parents, then you won't know if the same intervention works for groups that speak different languages. Even subtle differences can change the outcome. Repeating the experiment is key because it helps make sure the results are reliable and accurate. In the case of mental health during pregnancy, repeating the test can show whether support groups really help reduce postpartum depression or if other factors need to be considered. Now that we made it to the end of the scientific method, it is now time to put it all together. For this activity, we are going to create our own scientific experiment, starting with observation and ending with designing a test that we can repeat. Are you ready? Observe. Think about the observations you have made throughout the course of this training. Think about the things that go well and do not go well when people are receiving services while pregnant, postpartum, or parenting. What are some of your observations? Ask, what are some of the questions you have about what you've noticed? What are some of the things that could be done to improve services? How would you turn that idea into a research question? Please pause the video until you are ready to move forward. If you are following along independently, make sure to complete the questions in Module 2.5. Hypothesize. Did you think of some observations and questions about ways to improve substance use related services? Well, then we're off to a great start. Now we need a hypothesis about what could maybe answer some of those questions that we just came up with. An example would be something like, pregnant people who receive the option to attend a regular support group will experience less anxiety and depression after giving birth. Please pause the video until you are ready to move forward. If you are following along independently, make sure to complete the questions in Module 2.5. Predict. Now let's make a prediction. What do you think will happen if you implement your idea? For example, if pregnant people attend support group counseling, then they will report 20% lower levels of postpartum depression compared to those who do not attend. Please pause the video until you are ready to move forward. If you are following along independently, make sure to complete the questions in Module 2.5. Test. Now that you have come up with a prediction, it's time to design an experiment to figure out how to test your hypothesis and see if your prediction is correct. How would you design an experiment? For examples, will you divide people into 2 or more groups with different resources to see what happens? What outcomes are important to measure? How will you measure these outcomes and keep track systematically? Maybe you'll do surveys or interviews with participants. Repeat. Finally, how will you make sure your results are reliable? Maybe repeating the experiment with different groups? Please pause the video until you are ready to move forward. If you are following along independently, make sure to complete the questions in Module 2.5. Congratulations! You have just practiced all of the steps in the scientific method. Thank you for completing Module 2.5. If you're following along independently, make sure that when you complete the questions in this module to let your coordinator know that you are finished.